Captain Henrik Voss kept impeccable records, the kind of meticulous documentation that maritime investigators dream of finding when they pull a ship's log from wreckage or salvage operations. Every entry was time-stamped, every weather pattern noted, every crew rotation logged with the precision of a man who understood that the ocean demands respect through detail. The MV Njord was a research vessel operating in the Norwegian Sea, conducting deep-water surveys for geological formations that might indicate mineral deposits worth commercial exploitation. It was routine work, the kind that blurs days into weeks until something breaks the monotony, something that forces you to remember exactly when normal ended and nightmare began. For Captain Voss and his crew of 17, that moment came at 0200 hours on November 9th, when the hull-mounted hydrophones picked up a sound that should not exist. The initial acoustic signature registered as a low-frequency pulse, approximately 18 Hz, cycling every 47 seconds with mechanical regularity. Chief sonar technician Lars Berger noted it in his logs as possible biological activity, perhaps a pod of sperm whales conducting deep dives in the region, though the frequency was lower than typical cetacean vocalizations. The Njord was positioned over the Mons Ridge, where the seafloor drops to depths exceeding 3,000 meters, and the ship's sonar arrays were optimized for geological mapping rather than biological monitoring. But Berger was thorough, and he flagged the anomaly, adjusted the filters, and began recording. What came next would be analyzed by marine biologists, acoustic engineers, and naval intelligence officers for months afterward. And none of them would agree on what produced the sounds captured in those 43 minutes of audio data. The low-frequency pulse continued for 8 minutes, each cycle identical to the last, emanating from a depth of approximately 2,700 meters, almost directly beneath the ship. Then it changed. The pulse shortened, the frequency climbed to 23 Hz, and the interval between pulses decreased from 47 seconds to 31. Captain Voss, summoned to the sonar room by Berger's increasingly anxious radio calls, arrived to find his chief technician pale and sweating despite the frigid air circulating through the research vessel. The captain listened through the headphones, his expression shifting from professional curiosity to something harder to define, something that looked uncomfortably like recognition. He ordered the ship to maintain position, activated all recording systems, and instructed First Officer Solveig Andersen to wake the marine biology team. They needed documentation, he said. They needed witnesses to whatever was happening in the deep water below. The frequency continued to climb, 30 Hz, 41, 56. The intervals shortened until the pulses overlapped, creating a sustained tone that vibrated through the ship's hull with enough force to rattle equipment and set coffee mugs dancing across tables. The crew felt it in their bones, in their teeth, that subsonic pressure that bypasses ears and resonates directly in the chest cavity and the base of the skull. Marine biologist Dr. Astrid Kveland, roused from sleep and still pulling on her jacket as she entered the sonar room, listened for less than 30 seconds before removing the headphones and asking a question that Captain Voss had been carefully avoiding. What could produce a sound this loud at that depth and still be biological? The answer, which no one wanted to voice, was that nothing in the known catalogue of marine life should be capable of this. The blue whale, the loudest creature ever measured, produces calls at 188 decibels. The sound coming from beneath the Njord registered at 207 decibels, a volume that suggested either massive size or something fundamentally different in the mechanism of sound production. Then the screaming started. That is the word used in 7 separate crew testimonies, in Captain Voss's log, and in Dr. Kveland's official report to the Norwegian Marine Research Institute. Screaming. Not whale song, not the complex clicks and whistles of dolphins, not the grinding of tectonic plates or the groan of deep ocean currents moving across geological formations. Screaming. a sound that rose from the low tones into higher frequencies, cycling through harmonics that suggested a vocal apparatus of impossible complexity, or perhaps multiple sources coordinating their output to create interference patterns that human ears interpreted as coherent, anguished vocalization. The sound lasted for 4 minutes and 19 seconds, rising and falling in waves that made crew members cover their ears despite wearing hearing protection, and when it stopped, the silence that followed was somehow worse than the noise had been. If you have ever heard something that defied explanation, something that made you question whether the world operates according to rules you thought you understood, leave a comment below. Share your experience. Because what happened next aboard the Njord suggests that there are things in the deep ocean that we have not classified, have not measured, have not even begun to properly acknowledge. And the people who encounter these things need to know they are not alone in what they have heard and what they have felt in the cold hours before dawn, when the sea reveals its deeper nature. The screaming had stopped, but the hydrophones continued to record, and what they captured in the following 20 minutes would become the most analyzed and disputed audio file in modern marine acoustics. The sound that emerged from the deep was movement. Not the sound of something moving through water, but the sound of water being displaced by something so massive that the ocean itself seemed to protest the passage. Captain Voss ordered the ship's external cameras activated, the ones mounted on the hull for geological documentation, and the crew gathered around the monitors in the operations room, watching thermal and low-light feeds of the water surrounding the Njord. The sonar showed a contact, but it made no sense. The return signature was too large, too irregular, spreading across the screen in a pattern that looked less like a discrete object and more like a structure, something with geometry and extension that filled the water column from the seabed to within 300 meters of the surface. First Officer Anderson suggested equipment malfunction, but Chief Berger had already run diagnostics twice, and the systems were functioning within normal parameters. The sonar was reporting accurately. There was something down there, something that occluded the geological formations they had been mapping, something that rose through the water with a speed that seemed impossible for anything of that apparent size. Dr. Kveland watched the thermal feed, looking for the heat signature that would indicate massive biological activity, but the water temperature remained constant. Whatever was ascending toward them was cold as the deep water from which it came, and that single detail frightened her more than the size or the sound or the screaming that still echoed in her memory. Warm-blooded animals, even in the deep sea, generate heat. This thing did not. The hull of the Njord groaned, a metallic protest that ran the length of the ship as something passed beneath it, close enough that the vessel rose slightly in the water, lifted by displaced volume, then settled back with a shudder that knocked 2 crew members off their feet. The cameras caught nothing, only darkness and the faint particulate drift of disturbed sediment rising from depths that should have been still and silent. But the hydrophones recorded everything. The sound of appendages, plural, moving through water with articulated precision. The sound of suction, thousands of points of contact engaging and releasing against a surface that might have been rock or might have been the ship's own keel. And underneath it all, a low vibration, barely audible, that Dr. Kveland would later describe as intentional. As though whatever moved in the water was testing the Njord, measuring it, determining whether it was threat or prey or something else entirely. Captain Voss made the decision that likely saved his ship and crew. He ordered engines to full power, bearing 090 away from the Mons Ridge and towards shallower water. The Njord responded, propellers biting into the North Atlantic, and the ship began to move. For 30 seconds, nothing followed. Then the sonar contact changed position, rising to within 100 meters of the surface, and began to pace the vessel. Not pursuing exactly, but maintaining parallel course, keeping distance but not breaking contact. The hydrophones recorded new sounds, clicking patterns that cycled through frequencies too quickly for human hearing to fully process. Sounds that felt less like vocalization and more like echolocation on a scale never before documented. It was scanning them, Dr. Kvelland realized, learning the ship's dimensions, its composition, perhaps even detecting the crew inside the hull through acoustic imaging techniques that marine mammals use, but never with this degree of precision or complexity. The Njord maintained full speed for 47 minutes, and for 47 minutes the contact stayed with them, matching their course and speed with effortless precision. Then, as the ship entered waters less than 1,500 meters deep, approaching the continental shelf where fishing vessels and commercial traffic made detection more likely, the contact descended. The sonar watched it sink rapidly, accelerating as it dropped until it disappeared from the screen at depths beyond the equipment's maximum range. The last sound, recorded by the hydrophones, was the screaming again, but different this time, lower in frequency and shorter in duration, lasting only 18 seconds. Some of the crew interpreted it as frustration, the sound of something that had decided the pursuit was not worth continuing. Others, including Dr. Kvelland, heard something else in those final seconds. They heard a warning. They heard the acoustic equivalent of eyes watching, of attention maintained, of an intelligence that had catalogued the Njord and filed it away for future reference. The ship's log was submitted to Norwegian maritime authorities within 24 hours of the incident. The audio recordings were classified within 48 hours. The crew were interviewed separately, their testimonies recorded and sealed, and they were all asked, politely but firmly, to refrain from public discussion of what occurred on November 9th. Captain Voss complied with these requests, as did most of his crew, but he continued to maintain his logs, and those logs found their way to researchers who study phenomena that exist in the margins of official acknowledgement. The sound files, portions of them, have been analyzed by teams who will not put their names on the reports they produce. And those analyses confirm what the crew of the Njord experienced in those 43 minutes over the Mons Ridge. The sounds were biological. The sounds indicated massive size and complex cognitive function. And the sounds matched, with disturbing accuracy, the acoustic profiles described in historical accounts of encounters with creatures that mythology named, but science has steadfastly refused to acknowledge. If you value this information, if you understand that channels like this exist to document what others ignore, then you need to keep this channel alive. Subscribe. Share this account. Because the suppression of these events is not conspiracy, but institutional preference, the bureaucratic choice to classify rather than confront. And the only record that survives institutional silence is the record we maintain together, the community of people who listen and document and refuse to accept that the ocean's depths are empty of anything but fish and pressure. The Njord's encounter is not isolated. It is part of a pattern that extends back centuries and continues in waters all over the world, wherever humans venture into depths that were never meant for us. Stay warned, stay informed, because what lives beneath the surface does not care about our classifications or our skepticism, and understanding its existence is the only defense we have against becoming another unexplained incident, another ship's log that gets sealed and forgotten. Captain Voss retired 8 months after the Mons Ridge incident. Leaving the sea he had spent 32 years navigating. He moved inland to a small town in the mountains where the only water is a lake shallow enough to see the bottom on clear days. He does not give interviews and does not discuss what happened aboard the Njord. But once, speaking to a former crew member who sought him out looking for validation of shared memory, he said something that has circulated among those who study these encounters. He said that the worst part was not the sound, though the sound was terrible. The worst part was the certainty, felt by everyone on that ship, that they were being observed by something intelligent, something that understood what they were and chose, for reasons unknowable, to let them leave. He said that he thinks about that choice constantly, about what criteria were used to make it, and whether those criteria might change in future encounters. He said that the ocean is not a wilderness, but a territory, and territories have occupants who enforce rules that visitors do not understand until the moment enforcement occurs. The Mons Ridge continues to be surveyed for mineral deposits. Research vessels pass over the location where the Njord recorded its encounter, and their hydrophones pick up the ambient noise of a deep-sea environment. The clicks of hunting cetaceans, the groans of moving water, the endless background static of the abyss. But occasionally, on certain dates that seem to follow no pattern but which some researchers claim cluster around lunar cycles or tidal extremes, the hydrophones record something else, a low-frequency pulse, cycling at regular intervals, emanating from depths that should contain nothing but pressure and darkness. The pulse lasts for minutes or hours, then stops. And sometimes, not always but often enough to be documented, the pulse is followed by a sound that audio analysis cannot fully explain, a sound that rises through frequencies until it resembles nothing so much as a voice, vast and alien, screaming into the void that humans have only begun to explore. Those who have heard the recordings cannot unhear them. The sound follows them into sleep and surfaces in moments of stillness, a reminder that the ocean keeps its secrets not through silence but through sounds too terrible to acknowledge, sounds that confirm what ancient sailors knew and what modern science refuses to accept until confronted with evidence too substantial to classify away. The Kraken is not myth, it is not legend. It is a term applied to phenomena that recur across time and geography, encounters with something that lives in the deep places and occasionally rises to remind us that the abyss is not empty, but occupied, not dead, but waiting, not indifferent, but watching with senses we cannot match and intelligence we cannot measure. Captain Voss knew this. His crew knows this. And now you know this too. The only question is what you will do with the knowledge, whether you will dismiss it as fantasy or carry it with you as warning, whether you will look at the ocean surface and see only water or recognize it for what it truly is, a ceiling over depths where ancient things dwell, where the screaming never really stops, where the sound that followed the Njord continues to echo in frequencies that human ears were never designed to perceive, but which, once heard, can never be forgotten.